to bring us kind of all up to speed on what's happening in the larger picture and the larger perspective. So they had chosen the 10-year anniversary of Hurricane Katrina and honoring New Orleans. And part of the focus was to focus upon the greatness of Mother Nature and the power of water, and how we talk about the earth was formed in this way, and of how the earth is 70 something percent water, and how much of our bodies are made up of water, and the vibrational flow that we find during this time whenever the earth is trying to give us messages. And that's part of what I'd like to talk about today is that very thing of being able to, how do we translate the language of nature? How do we take what nature has been telling us this whole time and really find balance in our bodies? Because why do we call it devastation? Why do humans call it devastation? Because humans have evolved. They built homes, they built communities on the rivers, on the tributaries where, yeah, life has given them water source for their gardens and for their crops and everything that they need to have water for. But also whenever the weather rises up and the waters flow and the rains come and the thunder beings come and they visit and they do what they do, today's humans call that devastation. There was a time whenever people would pray for this. In times of drought, imagine whenever we go back and study ancient history of the Egyptians, and even here in the United States, some of the tribes that thrived in the deserts, and how at some point the earth evolved and changed, and the water that was once plentiful wasn't available anymore. And now we can go back in the deserts of Arizona and New Mexico and find the ruins where there was once great civilizations. Once great civilizations in Latin America and Mexico, in the that Meso Latin area down there. And we can look back in history and see how water has always dictated the path to the future, and how that water, and whenever we reach inside ourselves, perhaps that's where we come and we learn how to do ceremony. 17 years ago, I was going to we call it a Sundance ceremony, and a Sundance ceremony is done every summer, and the summer at the summer solstice. And so much emphasis is put on the summer solstice because in that moment, whenever they say that the sun is rising, and in that brief moment where it seems that time stands still, just for a few moments, we believe that during the summer solstice, that if we're in balance in our lives and how we are living our lives and how we're in balance in relationship with the mother, that whenever that solstice sun comes and it just starts to pass over and stand still just for that moment, there is no darkness in us. That in that moment of balance in all things of the earth, there are no shadows. So in the Sundance, that we try to invite, and they sing the songs of the Sundance songs. This was taking place in Angel Fire, New Mexico, up in the Santa Cristo mountain range. And it's probably about 10,000 feet, 10 or 12,000 feet high. And it had been a drought. 17 years ago, there had been almost a 3-month drought. They almost stopped us from doing the ceremony because it was so dry, and they were afraid that any spark just might ignite the whole mountain. So we prayed. And I kind of laughed at myself because I remember growing up watching the old Western movies. Have any of you ever seen the old John Wayne or Sundance, Butch Cassidy, or wherever you're from, wherever you see these Western movies, and sometimes they depict the Native Americans or the indigenous people as doing a rain dance or a rain song. And I remember growing up as a kid back in the 60s and 70s of watching these movies and wondering, where did they find these Indians that do that? Because I was a Native American Indian, and I didn't know any rain dance songs or anything like that. And I remember being in New Mexico 17 years ago and being asked to join in a circle of indigenous people. All of them look like I did, and all of them believe in Mother Earth. And they called us all together to sing a song for the rain to come, for the water to come. And for a brief moment, I felt shy. I felt shy because of the perception, I guess it was. I haven't really ever thought about it until now of how that really made me feel in that moment of a little bit of embarrassment, a little bit of, wow, you think just because we're Native Americans that we can just call rain and it shows up? And I began to wonder, where does this mysterious energy come from that we've been given? Why is it that for some reason there's a perception out there that my people have the ability to call the rain in? Now I realize that this happens in other cultures too, but it always seems to be the indigenous people of the land that are looked to, the ones that perhaps have maybe the most solid relationship, the deepest relationship with the mother. And I think that that's perhaps the mystery that people are trying to latch onto. Not necessarily whenever they see a culture that's connected to the earth, a culture whose lifeblood is in this time of harvesting as we go into the wintertime. We're planting seeds and we're harvesting. But in harvesting and gathering, it's also about what do we do in the beginning to contribute to the harvesting that happens months later? Who are the people that come in and till the ground and turn it up so the nutrients can be re-exposed? Who is it that comes in and does the work of laying out the lines so that the seed can be inserted into the earth and people come in behind it and cover the seeds? And it's part of a process of, I remember as a child of how we used to do it, where there would be someone going with the hoe and digging the trench. And then we'd be in a line and someone else would be coming with fertilizer, and right behind them, someone that would come in with the potatoes or whatever it was that we were growing at that time. And there was somebody behind me with a shovel covering everything up. And now we have machines that do this automatically. But we're contributing to the harvest. We're contributing to what we're gathering. Just like when I went to that Sundance ceremony and I was asked to sing in that rain calling ceremony, we were sitting there and one of the elders there was from one of the local tribes there in the New Mexico mountains, the Pueblo Indian people. And he asked that we all began to think of a seed before we started singing this song. He said, imagine any kind of seed, a corn seed, a flower seed, a seed that a dream for your children or the next generations, or a seed that is a memory of those that have gone past. He said, whatever that seed is that you would like to grow, whether you want to grow in memory of the past so that you might know your past and who you are, or whether that seed is the intention to grow to the future so it just might feed whoever might come along the path and decide to eat of its fruit. And that made sense to me. For the first time, I felt like I was part of a people that had been correctly identified, maybe kind of misgivenly through the movies and through TV shows. But I realized that in that moment, I was sitting in the midst of greatness. That all this energy of all these people from all these different indigenous tribes had come together intentionally, being called together to communicate with the mother, to communicate with the elements, the very elements that live inside of us. And maybe it wasn't until then that I realized of why can't I sing a rain calling song because I'm made of water? Why is it that I think it's so impossible for me to communicate with the cloud people? We're made of the same thing. We're made of the same elements. A good percentage of us. Like having a cousin. Maybe you have a brother or a sister, you're 100% related to them. Then you have your cousins, you're a little bit related to them. And maybe that's why we say relatives in our prayer whenever we pray to nature. our cloud relatives, the cloud people, the stone people, the rain people, the wind people, the tree people, the earth people. Maybe it's because of that connection that we have through water that allows us to maybe create the mystery that we're in, or maybe it's only mysterious because we lost touch with the knowledge that was always ours to have. And that's what I chose whenever I was sitting up on this mountain and it was so dry. It was so dry that a lot of animals had even left that area because there was nothing growing up there. There was nothing to refurbish to growth. So I got to experience nature. And it reminded me of that time whenever at the festival here in Asheville, whenever they were honoring water and the devastation that people said that it caused, which it did. It destroyed many homes, it took lives, it cost millions and millions of millions of dollars to kind of bring back into energy. And even now, 10, 15 years later, they're still recovering on some levels. But I also thought about these droughts that happened in the old days where civilizations disappeared entirely, where we as today's technology can tell us that, yeah, these people were here, but we have no idea what happened to them. They can take core samples from the earth. They can carbon date things and they can find relics and kind of give an idea or a time window of when and why and how they existed. And they can also look at that and see, well, you know, there was either a severe winter or there was a severe drought or there was a severe flood. And those kind of things fascinate me because it is we, the people of the indigenous earth, that return to that connection. We are able to go back into that part of us that is water, good vibes. The vibration that lives inside of us is already familiar with the language that's being spoken to us by the earth. Whenever we look at water, in those times when we're sitting at a picnic, maybe at the side of the lake or by the ocean, and we just enjoy the calmness of water. Or how many of you ever stood outside in a storm and experienced the wind whipping the water through the air and the trees bending to the will of the wind and nature's trying to communicate with us in a way? Maybe this was the rain that some of our ancestors prayed for 200 years ago, and it's just showing up. And we call it devastation, when maybe we could go back in our ancient memory of a time when our people needed this rain. And in this time when it arrives, whether it's the next day or an instantaneous rain that's happened, or maybe a rain that happens in 500 years, who are we as human beings to put time limits on when these gifts appear? And what is it that water is really trying to tell us? What is the lesson of patience? Water has been this long existing thing that is from the very, very, very creation of our earth. Why do you think it's so important to people all over the earth to protect clean water? Or to find ways to purify it to a place where it serves us again when we've created so much to destroy the pureness of what we had. And that's part of our evolution. It's part of harvesting the seeds of the past. Whenever our ancestors were out there preparing the garden that we're living in now, that we know as the earth, even before there were humans, the mother herself just maybe prayed for what might be an energetic pregnancy, to be impregnated by the energies of the universe, of the star system and the energies. And didn't Mother Earth have to join with something in order to create the life that lives here? So these are some of the questions that my people ask. You know, where do we have this inherent knowledge of how we were joined and who are our true parents as a human race here on this earth? Who is truly our mother? We say Mother Earth and Father Sky. Why do we say that? I have an auntie that was my grandfather, my father's father had a brother, my great uncle. And in the Cherokee tradition, my great grandparents had a large piece of land, over almost 300 acres of land, and they had three young boys. Now, those three young boys were there to ensure that the farm could be taken care of in the future. When the parents got old, they needed the boys to come and to maintain the land. So, whenever these boys got married, the parents made it very clear that they would have to bring their wife and live on this land, and live on this mountain and nurture this land. So my great uncle went out and he found a Cherokee woman, and my great grandparents weren't in any big hurry for anybody to get married, unless they were going to have kids. And so my great uncle brought a Cherokee woman home, a woman from our tribe. And my great grandparents told him, "Well, you're kin to her, so you can't marry her." So a few months later, he met another one from her tribe, and brought her home to his parents. And they said, "Well, you can't marry her either. She's part of our clan. She's, yeah, family within family." And so my uncle said, "Well, I'm going to go out and find a woman I know I'm not kin to." And he went out and found him a black slave woman. And she became my Aunt Ella. And Aunt Ella told us about whenever she was a child, she was born in a slave camp here in the mountains of North Carolina. She was born to parents that were slaves on a plantation where they picked cotton. And she told us, some of the old words that we have can be misleading. She said, how many of you ever heard that saying, when somebody looks like somebody else, or somebody has a child and somebody says, "Oh, they're a spitting image of you"? And she told her, she said, think about it. What is a spitting image? You think about, what does that mean that they look alike? And she said, no. She said what it was in the old slave days, the old slave people from Africa, whenever they would meet your child for the first time, they would say to the parents that this child is in the spirit and image of you. And that over time, spirit and image became spitting image. So something's lost in the interpretation. Now, can't that be our relationship with Mother Earth? So desperately trying to recreate that maybe Mother told us something that, what's that game we play as children? You whisper something in one person's ear and it goes around the room, and by the time it comes back around, it's something entirely different. And where are we in that process in our conversation with Mother Earth when she's sitting here waiting for us to whisper back what we heard? How certain are you that you've heard it correctly? And what do we do once we all come together as a people? We talk about oneness. We talk about the very water and the rain and the power of it and what it does to sustain us. Not only our earthly bodies, but what it does to connect our crops and how we see life, the beauty that we enjoy. The beauty of the fall leaves colors, the changing of the colors of the leaves here in the Smoky and Blue Ridge Mountains in North Carolina. Without the rain, we wouldn't have it. And it brings people to here to enjoy the beauty of it. People come and marvel. They spend all their money. They wait till the fall to come to the mountains to visit, just for those few moments to look at its beauty and appreciate it, and for whatever it does through their spirit. Maybe you have another destination you like to go to. I have a friend that goes to the beach. It goes down to Jamaica 3 or 4 times a year, because that's where he feels his calmness and beauty, and that's where he's called to experience it. So as we begin to harvest in this fall season of all this, well, in the northern hemisphere, our fall season, where we're starting to gather the crops that we planted over the past few months, start preparing for what it is, what we're going to do with this, and how is it going to feed our family? How is it going to sustain us in these months that we know that are coming up that are going to be difficult in the winter? especially here in these mountains whenever it snows and sometimes the roads close and the powers go off. I think Hasina experienced some of this disruption in the daily happenings, and without electricity, sometimes as a society, we're lost. Or at least we have that sense of feeling lost because we don't have these little things to pick up and distract us. But these are also things of vibration. They're also a way of communicating with the very vibration that our mother communicates with us. It's just a culmination of knowledge, of generations and generations of knowledge that have taken that language of the first language of nature. We've created and we envisioned a way, how can we connect everybody around the world? This is the fulfillment of that vision. It may not be the most effective or the best way for us because it creates problems too. It takes us away from our focus sometimes. I know people that constantly complain of they'll be sitting there and all of a sudden, oh, I need to put that down. And they recognize it in themselves that it's not serving them in that moment. So how is it that maybe whenever Mother Earth was trying to communicate with us and that little tone kept going off trying to get our attention, or the vibration sound of Mother Earth trying to send us a text or a message and say, hey, stop. And how many times have you heard your phone ringing or buzzing and you're like, oh God, that thing, not that thing again. I'm not even going to answer that. So what we taught ourselves about communication? What has been our process of what we do with the information that we're being given? Sometimes the information that we're being given isn't what we want to hear. Or maybe not the way that we wanted it. And that's why I've learned to pray more specifically, to learn my lessons. You know what, Creator, let me learn my lessons in life in kind, love, and compassion and gentle ways, please. Every single one of them, every day. Instead of saying, hey, if you could help me out, I'd appreciate it. But you don't know what you're agreeing to. So I'm learning to be more specific in my language with myself, with my community, and with Mother Earth, and with my relative star people. Whenever I get up in the morning and I look to the sun and I give thanks, hello, relative. Thank you. I welcome you. I recognize you. I see you. And I know you know who I am. Let's have a good talk today. Creating good relationships with everyone and everything in our life that matters. And to me, I think that that's what we have been taught through the vibration of water, of how integral water is to everything that we do, from the ideas of growing a garden, to sustaining the garden, to harvesting the garden, to sustaining ourselves through those times of darkness in the winter, to keep our own bodies going, to nurture the food that we put in it that needed water to sustain it. It's a process that we're going through. It's a continuous process of exchange of energy. So whenever the hurricanes come and the rains and the water flows, and whether it's torrid weather or whether it's peace calming wind, it's the same language. And sometimes it's up to us humans to take time to be quiet and listen to what Mother's telling us, and we all hear it. How many of you recycle? A lot of us recycle because why? Mother's asking for it. Composting. I didn't know what composting was, but we did it whenever I was growing up. We call it that. But, we gave that back to the earth in that way. So, this process of giving back, a reciprocity, whether it's through recycling or composting, this isn't a new idea. It's only been brought to light because it started to matter once that we saw that the earth around us was starting to be destroyed by the very things that we were doing to enhance it. just like these computers and just like these, all these things. My grandfather told me years and years ago that this was going to be our undoing and that humankind was going to outsmart themselves. Humankind was going to outsmart themselves because you look at all those tall buildings and skyscrapers. When they're no longer needed, where will they go? All the resources that we've taken from the earth to build planes and microchips and computers and the very fun, I've contributed to it too. I drive a car, I contribute to the gas emission problems and air pollution. I love listening to my music. I contribute to what they call noise pollution. And I'm trying to find a balance in my life so that I can have a good relationship and have the things in my life and live the abundance and live the prayer that my ancestors prayed for me. And at this Sundance, while we were sitting there and we were focused on our prayer to ask the rain people to come, to invite them. And it was one of the first times in my life after a lifetime of thinking I knew everything. I recognized in that moment, sitting in that circle with all these other indigenous people calling for the rain to come, I felt true humility. I felt truly powerless, but necessarily powerless. Not a bad powerless, like I was paralyzed and couldn't do anything. No, it's the kind of stillness, it's the kind of awareness that awakens the soul. It awakened my soul to the point where I was speechless. I had tears streaming down my eyes, where I didn't even have words to say to the Creator the tears and the sobbing, and that was the song. And that's the song we sang. 24, 25 of us sitting in a circle, singing a song that we all knew, but some of us singing it with a broken voice because our heart was pleading. All of us singing in one voice for the very same thing, for the people and for our mother, because our mother was calling for this. And after the ceremony was done, the last day, the Sundance lasts for 4 days, and about midway through the fourth day, it began to rain. At first, we could hear the thunder way off in the distance rumbling. And like I said, we were up in the mountain range, so we could see it. We could see the weather coming toward us. So we could see the lightning dancing across the sky off in the distance, and we could smell the rain. And after 4 days of dancing in the sun, all of a sudden on that fourth day, we could just feel the energy rise. We could feel everyone being rejuvenated, because a prayer was being answered. Now, was it our prayer or was it someone else's? That in the divine timing of life, they knew that at this time, well, we'll answer this prayer right now. We'll get around to yours here in a little bit. Or what kind of mindset is it that the person that sits there and say, oh, we made it rain. We sang this rain song and it did it and it rained. So there's two different perspectives. For those that move slow and easy, like the turtle, I'm sure everybody's heard the story of the tortoise and the hare. And maybe the hare is the one that says, hey, look what we did. We made it rain. And the turtle's over here. And it will rain again when someone else is praying for it. And perhaps that prayer will be answered exactly when it needs to be. So maybe that's why the turtle won the race in the end. And maybe that's why whenever we look at water and the floods that happen, maybe instead of thinking of these things as devastation, welcome them. Welcome them into our lives. Praise the rain. Praise what we call hurricanes or typhoons or monsoons. But think about all those civilizations that are gone now that wish they had that rain. And we're calling for it back then. And now it's here. And what do we do with the blessing that might have been offered for our people of the past? Just because it's not convenient for us, do we chastise it for being here? Or can we be patient enough to look back and honor it for being here and answering an old prayer? Because we're all going to pass on from this earth. When we took the first breath of life, we also made the agreement to take the last breath. And for everyone in between. And it's the water of life, and it's the water of earth, it's the water that we're made of as human beings. It's the water of the sky, the crystal clear, icy blueness that we call it sometimes when we look up into the night sky. Next time you're standing there by a body of water, or looking at the stars, or maybe even holding a crystal. To my people, crystals are what we call standing water. It's water form so that we can hold it. It's solid form, it's solid water. We call it standing water. And we take this standing water and we hold it because it represents everything that we are. And that's why my Cherokee people in our lineage, we use crystals in our medicine, in our ceremonies, our healing ceremonies, our prayer ceremonies. We always have crystals to represent that water and the direction. I don't know all the stories about crystals or what a 7-edge crystal or a 6-edge crystal or 5-edge. I know they all have different kind of energies and purposes. But I know that ultimately it's the crystal itself, regardless of how many this or how many that contains the medicine, combined with the energy in which we ignite it with, the memory that we bring to it. How many times before you walk out the door, you make sure this thing is charged up? How many times do you look at this and say, I need to charge my phone up? How many times when you wake up in the morning do you make sure that your battery is charged so that anytime the mother is ready to contact us, or nature is ready to contact us, or the ancestors are trying to contact us, can we be just as diligent as we are with these, with our ancestors? I encourage you to drink the water to recharge your battery because that's the language that we're speaking. It's the vibration in which all messages are given and shared. Whether it's part of the earth that is the 30% of solid of the trees and the earth and the dirt, but without the water, there's no root system for us to communicate. So in this time of the fall here in these mountains, let's remember what it is to harvest and to honor all that have contributed to the garden that we're being fed from. This organic fruit that we offer for one another. And I encourage you, how many of you are going to be participating again in the leadership course in the program? And I encourage you through this because this is just something I'm doing for myself, is to envision in the end of 9 months of what I contributed to this community to put food on our table. And can I start having ideas now about what to prepare? instead of just waiting for the last minute. Because I'm a very spontaneous individual. I'm very flowing. I like to, okay, I like this and like that. And I preached at a church yesterday where I shoot from the hip. I'm given an ideal and I open up the spirit and I flow with it. I take notes, but I seldom use them. So what are we going to do? What are we going to do prepare now? What is our call to action? Why are we here to listen to these stories other than to use them to help us grow? That's why I tell stories. That's why I listen to stories. To hear those little gems of wisdom that are inside of them. That's why sometimes when I'm by myself, I just tell myself stories just to hear what I have to say or have my thoughts out loud. I'm sure all of us have done that, just thinking out loud. And maybe these are the stories that are coming to us from within. And that's how we find peace and harmony, when we find that balance. Because there's going to be turbulent winds in life, there's going to be calmness. Humans have proven that there's going to be conflict no matter what. How do we find peace in these times when we, as a global nation, as a global tribe, one indigenous tribe of the earth, where do we look? Where do we find this peace that we're seeking so desperately? All of us, for whatever reasons. Our politics don't have to be the same. The name of our gods and entities don't have to be the same. But in the silence, can we honor the one voice that speaks to each and every one of us? And honor that. Do we have any comments or questions or?
Oh, there are a lot of comments in the chat, and there are some questions as well. And before we get to the question, for those of you who don't know, and Yona, I didn't get to introduce you because you spoke about flow, and I didn't want to interrupt your flow. So I just hit record and we started. But for those of you who don't know, Yona FrenchHawk is a full-blooded Cherokee wisdom keeper and ceremonialist. And he's also been a deep time leadership teacher, which I've been in the course and learned so much from Yona, as some of us here have, and I'm so grateful for that. And let's take some questions now. I'm just looking in the chat. Before I get to that, when you were speaking about being powerless, that just before that, the power went. So there's some darkness here. Okay, Kurt, you were asking a question in the chat. I don't know if you'd like to ask it, or would you like to unmute? Oh, okay. So Kurt wanted to know, how would you guide those of us who have lost this connection? You were talking about the connection to earth, to nature, all of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I do. Well, if you're familiar with Vision Quest, I do Vision Quest, but I've also learned here recently that to take some of the techniques that we have used for Sundance, uh, for example, before the 4 day Sundance happens, usually there's a 3 or 4 day preparation for that, which we call Vision Quest, Humblecha, which means to pray before the prayer. And it's in that Humblecha where we go for 4 days and we prepare sacredly. We prepare prayer ties and we take a piece of cloth and we say prayers for the people. And these are our protection. And so when we go on Vision Quest, we're put in a little isolated spot, probably about 10 feet by 10 feet out in the woods.
I
And
know that, you know, I know about the Vision Quest, and I would like you to continue because many people won't know. But the beauty of the
Well, the essence of that.
go ahead.
Well, Kurt, I don't mean that. I think I know what you're trying to get me to is that the essence of it is instead of doing vision quests and painting it in that way, is to invite people to come for a few days to a retreat to come and sit in nature,
Uh,
not to where it's a task. Because vision quest, when people hear vision quest, oh my God, I got to fast, I got to not drink water, I got to do this. No, to politely and compassionately invite people into an experience to where it
Beautiful.
doesn't, not everybody has to go to boot camp to get it.
Yeah. I've been blessed to be able to be with Wolf Wapenpaw, who's actually a Cherokee. Also, actually, he's Algonquin, but he's also run uh, the sun dances and things like that. He lives up in Ojai area, north of Ojai,
Oh,
and I've been working with his descendants of the earth. Uh, for people who can't get out into those extremes, like both of my boys have done a vision quest, and I've done one, and I've done tons of sweat lodges and so on. And for me, it's just getting into Mother Earth and to be able to be merged with the Great Spirit. For a person who's been an educator all my life and to be able to get it out to people who are, quote, the others is a big quest that this person has right now. We started something called the Peacemakers Circle, and we use any which way that we can to bring peace in everything and everything with peace. Uh, so if you have any clues or references or ways that would, in a way, bridge the gap. And I know the big thing is being with a person in that space, in nature, in any space. We don't have to be in nature with a person who is nature, because that's what these white folks like me have gotten away from is understanding we are that. We are that nature. We are not separate.
yes, very much so. And there's something too that I've been asked to do, and there's something I'll probably discuss with Tom and Hasina later on. Is that someone had asked me to do an online sweat lodge for people that maybe can't get out of their homes or people that can't sit in a sweat lodge, but to create an ambiance online to invite people into the experience. So that's something I'm working on, and uh, but I've experienced people just little websites of 5 minutes of serenity, and they might show a video of just a stream running or a waterfall or a bee going from flower to flower, and that's all it does for 5 minutes. And I find those very calming. Those are effective for me in a good way. And every now and then, a YouTube video, but I don't like hearing people talk too much. Tom, you're muted again. I mean, Kurt.
Good. Shamima, could you unmute Kurt?
Here we go. Okay. Sorry, I muted myself because I thought, I was done, so to speak. But this idea for me and the sense that I've had with people when we allow the silence to be there and we know it is or even isn't coming, we are present. We've created the sacred space. Because right now, there's no separation.
and this is one of my things that multitasking or trying to and reading some of what's going on in the chat here. It's interesting because of the connections that are being made. Because just yesterday, I spoke down in Raleigh, North Carolina, at a church, and last week they had talked about when you're lost, are you really lost, or are you being found? And when you're in a moment where have you ever been lost and you run into somebody that needed to see you, and were you really ever lost, or you are divinely connected? That just like what we're saying here, do we condemn the rain or do we show gratitude? Are we lost? Are we found? Or are we just are in divine time and we're exactly right where we need to be at any given moment?
The time is a human creation.
Yes, it is.
And it's the most insane thing we ever did to ourselves. For me, I don't know about the most insane, but sometimes I exaggerate. How big.
Is there any more questions? Comments?
If anyone wants to ask any more questions, please raise your hand or just put something in the chat.
Yona, thank you so much. Let me hop in with a comment and question as well. I've loved getting to know you this year. Every time I hear you, I have a deeper sense of that resonance. And I love your language about the frequencies. We happen at the top of the hour, at 3:00 Eastern time here, to be hosting a speaker named Jimmy Graypeck, who he is a biofrequency practitioner, and he works in what he calls biogeometry. When you're talking about the crystals, and this is something I've just learned in recent years, as I walk my own world of recovery from mechanical medicine, right, and biochemical medicine. Could you speak to what would be a wisdom language for that sense of resonance? Each of us has a crystal, and Hasina and I are both energy workers, and she's a yoga teacher, and so we can explore all of the different ways over time that Biped has tried to characterize chakra, energy centers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Every single one of our 100 trillion cells is an energy center. And even what we think of as matter is a frequency. In the interdependence, your language was that we are nature, and Kurt illustrated that brilliantly as well. The natural becoming that we were talking about before you hopped on, the evolutionary process. Could you presence some native wisdom that speaks to that, and how none of us is an isolate. We are not a distillate. We are the ever becoming. And if we pretend that we're something else, then all of a sudden that's the severing that you were talking about, the severing of the relationship.
Well, I appreciate the question, and my mind goes in so many different directions, but here's the one I land on. Is that when we go into the sweat lodge ceremony, we talk about the oneness, and we talk about to the Cherokee, going back into the sweat lodge is re-entering the womb of Mother Earth to be reborn. And we get to take all the information from the world that we see around us and everything that we don't like. We get to go back into the womb of Mother Earth, invited, and we get to cleanse. And part of that process is the stone people that we put into the fire. We warm them up so that we can bring them in. And inside the lodge, the pit represents the belly button, the umbilical connection. So we use that moment, and I tell people that we have the ability inside this ceremony to reconstruct our spiritual DNA. That we can, if there's something out of alignment in our spirit, then in this moment, whenever we close that door and we have all the elements of life combined, the earth, the wind, the fire, and the air, the water, All of it's combined. And when we breathe that steam in, it's all the elements of life brought in, and we believe we are breathing the divine breath of the Creator. That all the elements we understand that give us life as humans are brought together inside this womb, inside this sweat lodge, and that we are each just a cell within the larger body of a child that's going to be born into awareness. That we get to be that child, that Hasina gets to be a cell inside that child. Tom, everybody here gets to be a contributor to this child that's being born into the new awareness and cleansing itself of the world that it just came from, taking a moment to incubate and to include, to look at yourself in the mirror, to use that crystal medicine, to take that self-reflective energy that water gives us. Have you ever stood beside a still pool and just seen everything? In double, maybe. You see the reflection. It's like a mirror image. And that's why we use water as that symbolic bringing back to center. In dream work, they say if you're in water, then if you're dreaming in your water, then you're in your strength, you're in your buoyancy. And so whenever we ask people in ceremony to use this water medicine, the best way I can say it is I ask people to look in the mirror every day, and is what you see, is that your heart's desire? When you look in the mirror, is the first thing you say is, I love you, I'll do anything for you, how can I be of service to you today? And that's how we use that water medicine, that crystal, that reflection energy, to check ourselves first, just like we were saying. Let's make sure we're charged up first before we go out trying to do all this work that this is going to help us to do. So, I mean, when you said that, that's the reflection I got back of the crystal energy, is looking at our own fluid reflection.
That's amazing. You know, in this moment, I had this experience whenever I would write about, when I'm talking about water in writing, I'd always write H2O. It just made sense until today. And you were talking about water, and I wanted to write H2O, and I couldn't write it because it was almost like it was disrespectful. Like, it's more than H2O. It's a living, you know, you're interacting with someone. It's not just a chemical composition, something mechanical. So that's very interesting.
I had exactly the same experience, Hasina. Yeah. I kept myself from writing H2O several times. Yeah. My brain still wanted to do it, and I was addicted to that, but no, not today.
You're kind of new form of shorthand in a way.
Is that great? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, it's funny how the mind does that too. But just like what we said, what we were talking about, how someone whispers it in your ear, and by the time it gets around the room, you know, you have an equal sign, you have a division sign, you have a plus sign, and I'm over here with a minus sign. It is beautiful, and it's the respect in which we speak and how we respect what we're asking for and how we'll treat it once we receive it. Those are the things that I really try to share with the community of, you know, once you get it, what are you going to do with it? It's not enough just to have it. And how will you share the abundance? Because if you can pray and receive something like that, I want to know what you're praying, and I want to know what you're saying, and I want to know what your relationship is, because I'm impressed. The universe is there to honor your prayers and your requests, and I'd like to be on your team.
Thank you. That's such a great note to end this amazing hour with. So thank you so much, Yona. Thank you for your wisdom and for just sharing everything from your experiences. There's a certain vulnerability to sharing, and thank you for that. Thank you for standing in that space. And to everyone on this call, I just want to say that this storytelling that you've just experienced, Yona does do this. We have had storytelling sessions, and if you'd like to know when the next one is, then please put your email address and your name in the chat. And as soon as that happens, then I'll email you about the details. So feel free to do that. Thank you. It's been an honor.
Thank you all.
Okay.
Create a beautiful rest of your day.
You too.
You as well. Thank you so much.